there be a database system that tracks the Muslims here in this country?
There should be a lot of systems beyond database. I mean, we should have a lot of systems. And today you can do it.
For Muslims specifically, how do you actually get them registered into a database?
It would be just good management. What you have to do is good management procedures. And we can do that.
Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump saying he would implement a system to track Muslims in the U.S. Trump's not alone among Republican candidates who oppose President Obama's call to allow Syrian refugees into our country. Yesterday, Dr. Ben Carson drew a comparison between Syrian refugees and rabid dogs, saying the U.S. must balance safety against just being humanitarian. The remarks alarm many Muslims amid reports of vandalized mosque, possible arson, verbal abuse, and even beatings. Let's talk about it with our panel. From Newsmax Washington, we welcome in Nina Shea. Nina is currently the director at the Center for Religious Freedom at the Hudson Institute. She's also a former commissioner on the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. Skyping in from Arizona, we're joined by my personal physician, for purposes of full disclosure, Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. Zuhdi, the founder and president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, and he is also the author of A Battle for the Soul of Islam, an American Muslim patriot's fight to save his faith. Thanks to you both for joining us here on Newsmax Prime. Nina, first to you. Are you concerned that the war of words over refugees could suddenly have Muslims cast as targets in the United States?
Well, I am concerned that there's a lack of nuance in the whole debate, JD. And, you know, Zuhdi Jasser is a perfect example of someone from Syrian extraction whose parents came to our shores as immigrants and basically as refugees from a very, difficult place. So I am concerned about that. I'm also concerned about the fact that the debate has sort of focused on whether Christians should be the only refugees, when in fact there's only been one Christian family a year allowed in from Syria into the United States over the last 5 years, one a year for each of the last 5 years of civil conflict and violence and terror in Syria. And there's only been in 5 years one Yazidi. So these minorities are also a huge issue, and we shouldn't even be framing the debate about whether there's only Christians or not, because right now there are virtually no Christians and no Yazidis, and the whole thing lacks nuance.
Well, Zuhdi, I'm interested in your situation. When you hear the talk of Muslims having to register in a database, what goes through your mind?
Well, what goes through my mind is that we keep missing the core issue, which is this is not a battle against Muslims. This is a battle against Islamism. So just as in the Cold War, we filtered against communists and those who were members of the immigration paperwork still asked, are you a member of the Communist Party? So when we have a leadership president that refuses to identify Islamism as the problem, we should not be allowing Islamists in. Unfortunately, what happens is then our population, Americans, get fearful. We have no leadership. So they start missing the mark and unable to thread the needle between Islamists and regular Muslims. And sadly, what that does is it prevents the strategy we need. And they start talking about labeling all Muslims and others. We don't track these refugees when they get here. There's a recent report that 3 months later, after refugees got to Louisiana, the services taking care of them had no idea where they went. Listen, I have family in Damascus. If there was mass exodus of Muslims in northern Syria down to Damascus, you don't think they're going to ask them, are you an Islamist? Are you ISIS? They would. And that's inside Syria, Muslim to Muslim. So if we don't do it, that's crazy.
So you don't have any problem in terms of making this distinction between Islamism and practicing moderate Muslims. It's just the concern that this gets lost in the debate. Correct, Zuhdi?
Exactly. Is that if we don't make that and we continue to say, well, it's either we accept all of them and according to the president, we don't have a faith test. No, we don't have a faith test, but we certainly have a political ideology test against those who don't believe in democracy and freedom. And that's going to include Islamists that embrace a theopolitical ideology. And he needs to convene a task force of reform-minded Muslims that will help them figure that out. It's not too hard, and we need that for our own security's sake.
Well, I wish he'd give you a call, but I don't think you ought to hold your breath about that, Zudi, unfortunately. Nina, with the time that remains, let's move to action. Yesterday on Capitol Hill, the House passing the SAFE Act bill, which would expand background checks on Iraqi and Syrian refugees. It also puts a pause for now on accepting those Syrian refugees. In your opinion, at this point in time, for the moment, is that a good idea?
Well, I think that we need to be careful about our security, but again, I am concerned about these non-Muslim minorities that are facing genocide. Pope Francis called it a genocide, many others have as well. And there can be no doubt that people are still, Christians, Yazidis, are still being enslaved, being beheaded, being crucified. And I have cases in my file just from the last couple months of this happening. And actually, they're not in the mix at all. They're not going to even be vetted. There's not going to be any background checks on them because the UN does not refer any of these minorities, these non-Muslim minorities, to the United States. It doesn't refer them to anybody because I was told by the State Department that they're not in the system. So again, there's a whole sort of demagoguery on both sides of the aisle here, and we have to have a deeper understanding of who's coming to our shores and who's not coming, who should be coming.
Zudi, very quickly, the president yesterday compared Syrian refugees to, quote, tourists. Do you agree with him? 15 seconds.
They're not tourists. Assad is handing out passports because he wants to depopulate Syria of Sunnis. So these are displaced people who are, many whom seeking freedom, others are wanting to sow chaos. So ultimately, we have to represent what our Statue of Liberty is, but not do it stupidly but smartly and filter out Islamists.
Zudi Jasser in Phoenix, Nina Shea in Washington, you have our thanks. Still to come, the world according to Betsy McCoy. She joins us.